YouTube videos with top blank tips are really common, but what seems to be missing to me are videos that take all of people's tips and unify them under one theory or way of working. So what I want to do today is take my top 5 advanced event photography tips, which actually was one of my very first YouTube videos, and talk about how they not only work in concert together, but how they actually form a methodology when it comes to shooting events. So before I can do that, I first need to revisit those advanced event photography tips. So let's talk about the first one. The first one is pre-selecting your focal point, but I actually need to insert tip 0 into this one for it to make more sense, and that would be to memorize your focal lengths. Memorizing your focal lengths means if you're shooting with a prime at least, you know exactly how many steps you need to take forward or backward, left, right, in order to get your shot. A lot of memorizing your focal lengths is also about being able to pre-visualize your shots. So that's tip -1, pre-visualizing your shots so that you already know what the image is going to be before you're actually raising the camera to your eye. So now you've got your image planned out in your head, you know your field of view, you know how many steps to take forward, and now we can go to tip number 1, which was pre-selecting your focal point. So what you're doing is you're using your thumbstick, your controller on the back of the camera, so that as you're doing that step forward, backward, whatever, you're positioning it into the position, you're putting it in the position that you know you're going to place your subject matter. So if you're going to do a rule of thirds composition, you're already moving your focal point over to 1/3 of the way, and that way by the time you're taking your shot, you're there, you're ready to go, just back button focus or your preferred method of focusing. So number 2, let's take a look, would be shooting with both eyes. Shooting with both eyes is a big one for me. For portraits, shooting with both eyes lets you connect with your subject matter, especially if you're one-on-one. A lot of photography is not about technique, it's not about all of that. It's actually about knowing how to work with people, making them feel comfortable, etc. So when you shoot with both eyes, people are able to connect with you a lot better than when you're hiding behind a giant big black camera. For events, there's more to it. I shoot with both eyes for a variety of reasons. The first would be when I'm shooting with both eyes, I feel I'm better able to time the peak of action than I can when I'm only shooting with one eye. There's something about the tunnel vision I get from shooting through my viewfinder that I don't like. And what I do is I use my right eye, my dominant eye, to basically make sure I'm focusing, etc., line up my focal point, and I'm using my left eye to just have a more complete picture of what's going on in front of me. And I find I'm better able to time my shots that way. Number 3 is to read the room and follow the energy. When I give this tip, I'm of course worried people think I'm getting really woo-woo with following the energy, but it is very real. There's a lot of conscious things we're aware of, and there's a lot of subconscious things that we pick up on. For example, very conscious stuff, we're probably noticing the sounds, a lot of noises coming from one area of the room. We notice smells, but there's of course a lot of other things we are noticing that we're not consciously aware of. So one way you can first start out by trying to follow the energy is actually consciously paying attention to things. The other one is just let go a bit and see where your body wants to take you. Where do you feel like the action is going to happen? Get in touch with your own feelings and all that, and you should be able to do that successfully. The idea is to gravitate toward where things are happening, not just so you're not raising your camera for no reason, just taking a shot for no reason. You want to find where the action is. Tip number 4 would be, once you've established an ability to follow the energy, is to predict the smiles. So you're following the energy, there's the life of the party, or you're just browsing into an area, you're browsing an area of a room maybe, and you see a lot of people there's a lot of energy going on. So what you can do then is look at the eyes to predict the smiles. And I don't know how many people have thought about this before, but you can completely predict when someone's going to smile, sometimes minutes before they do. And it comes down to subtle cues. But the one I'm going to talk about today is reading the eyes. The eyes give it away. Before people are actually going to smile with their mouth, they often smile with their eyes. When you're at an event, people are usually talking, and when someone's talking to you, they can't just smile. But if you look at the eyes and you read their body language, they are going to smile, and that smile will come in the pause. What they'll do is pause between sentences and use that as an opportunity to connect with the person they're talking to. They want to make sure what they're saying is resonating, that they feel heard. They want to see how the person is responding. And so in that moment, they pause and give a smile. And it's very common. It's very predictable to do. The fifth tip was timing your shot just ahead of the peak of action. It's really important that we understand that there are a lot of delays that happen when you're making an image. First, you're perceiving and then choosing to respond. As you respond, there is of course a motor skill delay, but on top of that, your camera actually does have a delay. It's a very small delay, but there is a delay between the moment you press the shutter and the moment it actually makes that image. So keep that in mind. By timing just before the peak of action, you're often able to get that moment exactly as you wanted it. Also, I want to add that I personally find that when I do not shoot in continuous autofocus or a continuous burst, that my timing is more accurate than just firing off a burst. It may seem logical that by firing more shots, you're able to time your peak of action better or guarantee you get that peak of action. But what I find happens is that when shooting under 10 frames a second, the peak of action, the decisive moment, often happens between shots because it's too slow. If you have a really fast shooting camera, 10 frames a second or higher, I think you could probably manage, but I have found that I have a higher hit rate by actually just really staying focused and attempting to time my shots perfectly. So let's talk about how all of my tips are working together and forming a methodology for shooting events. First, I'm always staying present. I need to talk about presence before I can talk about any of this, because so much of what I do is about being present in the moment and being able to read things. If you're somewhere else with your mind, you're not going to be present. So you need to get to the point where you can just be only focused on the task at hand. And how do you do that? You do that by first developing the skills over time in order to make sure that it's all intuitive. You do not want to consciously be thinking about your photography when you're actually shooting. You want to, with repetition, solidify all of the skills I talked about so that it frees you up to just be present. So let's talk about how they're all working together. So first, by pre-visualizing my composition, I already know the image I'm trying to capture. Because I've memorized my focal lengths, I know exactly what my field of view is depending on the lens I'm using. So what I'm able to do is walk the exact amount of feet forward, backward in order to get the shot I want. While I'm doing that, because I have pre-visualized my composition, I know where my subject matter is going to be in that composition, and I'm able to pre-select my focus point. By shooting with two eyes, I'm able to better time my peak of action, but on top of that, I'm also able to look for alternative shots. I'm basically waiting for a moment to happen, which I can predict by reading the body language, specifically the eyes, and I can time the pause in the sentences, the pause between sentences, and I'm able to make sure that if another moment is happening, I can switch over to get that moment. Event photography is about maximum coverage. Maximum coverage does not mean more photographs. Getting maximum coverage means you're capturing as many moments as you possibly can. Shooting with two eyes assures that you're able to get alternative moments that are about to happen if the one you're waiting for doesn't happen first. By staying very present and following the energy, I can maximize my coverage by moving into areas I know a lot will happen. Now, a little note for you guys if you're going to do that. Every party or event will have VIPs or someone who's the life of the party. It's going to be natural that if you do this, you will get more shots of those people. But what you can do is consciously do a once over in the room that you're in every once in a while, or the field, wherever you're at, where you just look around and say, did I get a shot of that person? Yes, no, okay. And try to make a mental note that you are going to look for meaningful moments from that person. Unfortunately, sometimes that doesn't happen, and that's okay. But what you can do just to save yourself is make sure you get a shot of everyone. Just one shot that is just to say you got the shot of the person, but the majority of your work should be about following the energy and getting as many moments as you possibly can. If you guys have been listening to this video and my channel, you guys probably are well aware that I think the most important thing really when it comes to working as a professional photographer, as far as your skill level, is how present you can be with the work at hand. Being present is very difficult if you have to consciously think about things. And what I mean is, if you're thinking about your aperture, your shutter, and all those things, or if you haven't memorized focal lengths and you don't really know what the viewfinder is going to show you by the time it reaches your eye, that's all going to slow you down. But through repetition, a lot of that, if not all, will eventually become very intuitive. You're no longer consciously thinking. And that's going to free your conscious brain power to think of new ways to work. Now that you're able to flawlessly shoot in the way you're used to, what are some new ideas you can bring into your event photography? Because like I've said, since the beginning of my channel, I think you really need to make sure you stay engaged with your craft so that you don't burn out, so that it stays fun, so that you grow as a photographer. So I hope that's going to give you guys a good indication of my methodology of working, how I use all of the tips I've given you in concert. As always, I really appreciate all of you guys that watch my content. If you're new to the channel, please do like and subscribe. It will help me out quite a bit. You made it to the end of the video, so I guess you got something out of it. If you want to support me further, I got to get better at asking this, but I do have a Patreon page, and you guys can support me there. Unlike other channels where they're really just offering bonus content, what I'm trying to do is actually offer mentorship so I can help you guys further, not just take from you guys. I'm not interested in that. I made this channel to help people. So that's it for today.